All right, morning, everyone. That's what I like to hear. You guys are awake. That's good. Hey, a couple quick things just before I jump in. First of all, as Casey just mentioned, tonight is the VIP, which stands for Vision, Information, and Prayer. And this is just an opportunity for you guys to come out and kind of find out what's going on here at the church. We try to be very transparent. It's a great opportunity for you to come and ask questions and get answers to all your burning questions. It's a chance for us to pray together, do a little worshiping together. And so we want to invite you back here tonight, 6. We're going to only go an hour unless you have lots of questions. Then we'll go as long as whoever has the questions wants to go. Also, as you exit out here to the right, you'll see lots of sweets. I mean, lots of baked goods. It all goes to a great cause. We have a team of about 9 people that are going to the Dominican here in November, and they're trying to raise more funds to go towards supporting that mission trip. So it's a great cause. So if you want to go out there and support that, drop a couple $100 in there. And then if you do that right now, you can actually bring the dessert in with you and spread it out. So anyway, it's a great cause. So be sure and support that as well. We're in this series called Withness, and togetherness is our greatest witness. I want to tell you, I really got nailed this week because somebody said that they're trying to diet, and they have this peanut butter and jelly sandwich staring at the entire series. So I apologize for that. We don't want to cause people to stumble. But I kind of came across anybody ever seen this online thing called Babylon Bee? Does anybody know what Babylon Bee is? There's a handful of you. Basically, Babylon Bee is this satire. Now, how many of you know what satire means? Any few of you? All right. Satire is basically, it takes the form of journalism. It is basically told in such a way that there might be a nugget of truth to it, but most of it's like the true fake news. All right. This is real fake news. If it's satire, it's fake news. But if it's done really, really well, you wouldn't believe the number of people that get mad about it and start commenting on it. I remember there was one that was on about Chris Tomlin that Hudson comes walking to my office and says, "Can you believe this, what they're doing to Chris Tomlin?" I mean, he was upset. He was ready to write. I'm like, it's satire. Anyway, so I was coming across, anybody remember Mad Magazine? Growing up, Mad Magazine, it's kind of like that, okay? It's called Babylon Bee. Some of you are going to start looking for it right now, I know. But I came across some articles, and I just thought I'd share a few. And again, remember, this is fake news. But here's one. Back pew voted the best spot in church for the 58th year in running. All right, that was the title, the back pew. Now, we don't have pews here, but those are high-dollar seats back there. I want to tell you right now, people fight over those seats back there. So there's a nugget of truth to that. Here's one. 78% of marital problems are now caused by HGTV home renovation shows. Here's what the article says. A stunning new study just published by Lifeway Research found that up to 78% of all marital fights and problems come from watching home renovation shows on HGTV. Now, at this point, there's a nugget of truth to that, isn't there? Here's what it says. Most fights used to be about things like finances or kids, but now settling in to watch other people do a great job renovating their homes while your house is falling apart is the number one cause. It seems that watching Chip and Joanna Gaines renovate a $20,000 fixer-upper into a gorgeous home has caused irreparable tension in millions of marriages across the country. Contraro, the expert, further indicated that most of the marital fights observed during the study occurred as the wife began to passive-aggressively utter phrases like, "That looks really easy," and "I bet you could do that next Saturday," before searching online retailers to see how much shiplap costs, all right? So, do you guys know what shiplap is? Anybody out here know what shiplap is? See, I did not even know. I had to look it up. Here's one. Church introduces coin-operated side door to bypass greeters, lines, and everybody. I know a lot of you would love to do that, right? And if we could just get a kiosk for your credit card, we may consider that, all right? Here's one. Christian man denies being a fan of Taylor Swift 3 times. Before the cock crowed, I think. 3 times he denied that. Any fantasy football league players or baseball? Any fantasy players out here? Let's see your hands. You can admit it. All right. ESPN launches fantasy preaching software. You can track stats like conversions, Greek words utilized per minute, arm movement, and scripture references in real time. So you just draft a team, and there you go. Here's one. This might get a little close, but for those into church politics, listen closely. A local church votes to repeal worship band's drum set without replacing. Repeal it without replacing. Here's what it says. First Baptist narrowly voted to repeal and not replace a measure that had approved the installation of a controversial new drum set on the church's stage. Sources from inside an 8-hour-long leadership team meeting confirmed Thursday. The drum kit was totally repealed and taken outside the church, being replaced with an empty spot on the stage as the Lord would desire of us. The bill was finally approved after hours of heated debate, including discussion on a compromise plan to repeal and replace it, with accusations of liberalism and apostasy flying around the room. Someone said, if we vote to replace it, we're no better than the liberals who had it installed in the first place. Repealing without replacing is the only way to go. The vote was 12-10 in favor of the repeal plan, with several leadership team members who had fallen asleep unable to cast their vote. So there you go. Speaking of no drums, by the way, let me just work this announcement in. In 2 weeks, on this stage, on Sunday mornings, you're not going to want to be late. We have my brother's keeper. They're going to be here, an incredible young group of guys. They play some incredible music. So since we're doing this series on one another, we're doing this series. It's called Sing. On that Sunday, it's Sing with One Another. So you're going to be here. They don't have drums. They have guitars, mandolins, fiddles, upright basses. It's incredible. So you want to be here for that. Now, the whole reason I went on this little rabbit trail in the first place is because of this whole idea of, I was thinking about moving. You know, anybody ever done any moving before? Anyone? Yeah. Well, here's what I came across this article, said, a man with a pickup truck was informed he has the spiritual gift of helping people move every weekend. After his whole old Honda Civic finally quit on him, local man Pete Herbert recently bought a used Toyota Tacoma, prompting leaders at his church to almost immediately declare that he has the spiritual gift of helping people move every single weekend. Pete, you clearly have the spiritual gift of helping people move all of this other stuff out of their old places, loading it all up on your truck, driving across town, and unloading it all, a pastor told Herbert. We thank you in advance for your selfless and completely voluntary service to the members of this church. The church even administered a standard spiritual gift test to Herbert to confirm the pastor's hunch. And sure enough, it came back positive for the spiritual gift known as hauling furniture, boxes, appliances, and anything else other church members need moved in a moment's notice. Coincidentally, HUD has somebody out there walking in the parking lot right now, and if you have a truck, he's writing down your license plate right now, and Brandon's getting out the spiritual gifts assessment. Here's the last one, and I'll move on, all right? Bear one another's burdens. Sermon suspiciously close to pastor's moving date. So this pastor apparently preached a sermon called Bear One Another's. He preached a stirring sermon on bearing one another's burdens Sunday at Harvest Baptist Bible Fellowship's morning service, just as the leader prepared to move to his new home across town, sources confirmed. Bear one another's burdens, beloved, and unusually passionate, Zaxby reportedly implored his flock as he dove headlong into Galatians 6:2. Let's really live this out. Maybe you can talk to a friend that is struggling, or help a beloved individual in your church move their sofa and all their heavy bookshelves. What a great application to that verse. Zaxby went on and said to also have identified several common burdens that individuals struggle with, including insecurity, depression, loneliness, and realizing you've hardly done any packing despite the fact you have to be out of your house within a week. Additionally, to really drive home his point, Pastor Zaxby asked the congregation to write on a connection card 1 or 2 things they would commit to doing this week in order to bear someone's burden, and to drop those cards in the offering plate along with whether or not they were free on Saturday and they had a pickup truck available. Notice the theme. All throughout that, there were all kinds of themes about churches and moving. And I'll have to say that if I'd have preached this sermon last week, some of you would accuse me of the same thing. Because this past weekend, we were helping my daughter and son-in-law move into their new place. And I know our children's pastor was moving. And before that, a couple weeks, we had Jay moving. So a lot of us have done the moving thing. But today I am talking about, as we continue our series on one anothering, is the whole idea of carrying one another's burden. The idea of carrying one another's burdens. If you've been a part of a church for any amount of time, then you've had the opportunity to carry one another's furniture, for sure. But you've also had the opportunity to carry one another's burdens. The whole idea of carrying furniture or moving furniture, well, that's one of the advantages of being a part of a community group. Because if you're part of a community group and somebody in your community group moves, there's a good likelihood they're going to help you. That's a small advantage. But if you've also been a part of church, and I know as a staff we've been a part of this, sadly, is sometimes there are people who are set out on the porch and they're told that basically if you don't get your stuff moved, it's going to be put out in the front yard. And you have until Friday to get it done. And so people scramble to get there to help those people so they don't have their furniture just thrown out on the front lawn. Sadly, or maybe realistically, even this church has moved a lot. Before we came here on Mother's Day, we set up and tore down and set up and tore down and moved every Sunday. 322 Sundays, but who's counting? For 322 Sundays, this church would unload a trailer or unload a storage space and set it all up, and then as soon as church was out, they'd tear it all down and load it back in or put it back in the trailer and send it back out. 322 Sundays we did that. And in my years of ministry, and in my own personal life experience, I know I've moved 10 times myself. And I know that I've had the opportunity, the privilege, to carry plenty of upright pianos and sleeper sofas and washer and dryers and many other things. If you're a part of a church, there's a good likelihood you're going to get asked to help somebody move. But if you're a part of a church, there's also a good likelihood that if you look around, there are a lot of people who are carrying some burdens that need some lifting as well. There's a lot of heavy lifting that needs to be done. And there's countless opportunities for it. And so in Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, and if you've got a Bible right underneath you or around you, you can actually turn on page 1034 in that book to find Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. Paul writes to the church in Galatia, this is what he says. Brothers and sisters, if someone is overtaken in any wrongdoing, you who are spiritual, restore such a person with a gentle spirit, watching out for yourselves so that you also won't be tempted. Carry one another's burdens. In this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone considers himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Let each person examine his own work, and then he can take pride in himself alone and not compare himself with someone else. Verse 5, for each person will have to carry his own load. If you've ever read the book Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, it starts off with 3 simple words. Life is difficult. Life is difficult. I don't think there's anybody here that would disagree with that statement. It may not be difficult for you right now, but it's getting ready to be difficult. Or it has just been difficult. But life is difficult. And we all have struggled, and we've all had to carry heavy burdens. As I reflected back of my 25 years plus of ministry, not only did I think of a lot of heavy furniture pieces that I've had to help carry, but I was thinking of all the heavy burdens that I have come alongside of or that I have seen people come alongside and have to carry. I've seen financial burdens. I've seen an incredible amount of debt burying people. I've seen churches that dealt with an incredible amount of debt. I've seen people lose their business, their jobs, their homes, and even their marriages. I've seen the burden of addiction, both for the one who is addicted and the family member or the families who love someone who is addicted. I've watched people struggle with physical burdens, blindness, death, being wheelchair bound because of MS or ALS or many other things. I've seen it. I've experienced and been around those carrying emotional burdens, depression, anxiety, panic, burnout, and a host of other phobias or fears that keep us from really living out our life. And I've seen that burden in many ways played out. Sadly, I've experienced firsthand the burden of grief and dealing with the death of a loved one, young or old, expected or unexpected, cancer, heart attack, overdose, suicide, traffic fatality, and yes, even murder. And it is overwhelming. Those burdens are heavy, heavy, heavy burdens to carry. And that's one of the reasons we have started this grief share on Monday nights right across the parking lot at 6:30 every Monday. Is I know there are a lot of you here who are carrying this heavy burden of grief. And we don't want you to carry it alone. And so I don't know what's keeping you from being a part of that, but you need to be. And so every Monday, right over here at 6:30, it is an opportunity for some people to get together and somewhat share that heavy burden of grief. I've seen people carry the heavy burden of past mistakes. Oh my gosh. A lot of you right now are carrying the heavy burden of past mistakes. You're weighed down by guilt and shame, and you continuously keep playing it over and over and over and over again. Even though Jesus said you're forgiven, you won't forgive yourself. And that is a heavy, heavy burden. And then there are the spiritual burdens, the burdens that some of us are wrestling with right now because you are involved in sin and you are struggling with that. As James illustrates in chapter 1 of James, verse 14, 15 says, "But each person is tempted when he is drawn away and enticed by his evil desire. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is fully grown, it gives birth to death." Do you see the cycle of sin? Do you see what it can lead to? Do you see the heavy burden? Jesus says this in the Message, which is kind of a Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, but in John 8:34, Jesus said, "I tell you most solemnly that anyone who chooses a life of sin is trapped in a dead-end life and is in fact a slave. A slave is a transient who can't come and go at will." There is nothing more burdensome than being trapped. There's nothing more burdensome than being in a situation where you just can't come and go as you feel like it, where you are now enslaved. And so as you look around this room, I'm just talking about in the past 25 years of ministry experience, but if you just look around this room, there's a lot of heavy burden carrying going on. And many of you are doing it by yourself. You're doing it on your own. And God's intention for the church is that we become a community, as Paul's writing to the church in Galatia, that we become a community that helps to carry, to shoulder, to come alongside of people who are carrying a heavy burden. So as we break this down, you see in right off the bat in chapter 6, verse 1, it says brothers and sisters. So basically, as this whole series has been about, it's basically Paul or talking about the church. Those of us who call ourselves followers of Christ. And so he says, brothers and sisters. And so he's talking to those who are related. And what makes them related is that they're a part of the family of God. And then he says, if someone is overtaken in any wrongdoing, another way of saying that is sin. If someone is overtaken in sin, and I think it's not so much an if, right? If someone is overtaken in sin. I don't know. At least for me, it wasn't an if. It's more like a when. When someone is overtaken in sin, Paul says, you who are spiritual, he's not saying you who are perfect and without sin. He's not saying you who's got it all together. He's saying you who are spiritual, which is basically saying trying to walk and trying to be led by the Spirit of God. You who is trying to draw closer to him every day. For those of you who are like that, then you need to restore such a person. Now what's interesting in this word restore, basically what this word restore means in the Greek is it's basically like mending a broken bone. So if you've broken your arm or your leg, it's putting it back together. It's mending it, or mending fish nets. It's setting it back to being right again. But he says when you do it with a gentle spirit. This isn't saying go be the righteous Gestapo and kick down people's doors. When you restore someone with a gentle spirit, because he then goes on and even warns you, for anyone who considers himself to be something, well, you're deceiving yourself because you're not. Because we all carry burdens. And so what he's doing is he's urging us, first of all, you make sure your heart's right before you start going in there and trying to straighten up somebody else's. And so basically he continues on. And then he says this, burden bearing is one of the ways that we fulfill the law of Christ. Well, what is the law of Christ? Well, we know that Jesus was asked, what is the great commandment? All the commandments, which one's the most important? Love God, love people. That's narrowing it really down. That's breaking it really down. But we know that the law of Christ is basically to love one another. John 13:34, Jesus said, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. So just as I have loved you, you are to love one another. That's the law of Christ. And so he's basically saying when you do that when when you bear someone's burden, then basically you're fulfilling the law of Christ. And then here's what he says, and this is where I just want to camp out as I finish up. Is there's two verses that seems like they're in contradiction of each other. If you look at verse 2, and then you look at verse 5, carry one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Carry one another's burdens. And then there's verse 5, for each person will have to carry his own load. What happened there? In one moment he's saying, carry one another's burdens, and the next moment he's saying, carry your own load. I don't get it. Why the contradiction? Well, here's the thing. Are we supposed to carry other people's load, or are we supposed to carry our load? Are we supposed to help shoulder other people's burdens, or are we just supposed to worry about our own? Yes and yes. Both. And it's kind of important to know how the Greek text here is, because the Greek here basically has two words for the word burden. The first term is the word baros. Baros in verse 2 means this: the weight of a heavy load. And when I think heavy load, I want you to think of a boulder. I mean a huge, huge boulder. It's an excess burden. These are the kind of burdens like boulders that can crush you. And there's no way you can carry that one alone. It will break your back. It will crush you. And it's during those times, those crises, those tragedies, where we need to come and help people shoulder that burden. That's what baros means. That's why he says that we need to carry one another's boulders. But then he gets to verse 5, and he uses the Greek word fortune, or phortion, which in verse 5 refers to a man's personal load. Think of a backpack, a knapsack, in the sense that what he's saying is, we all have loads to carry. We all have struggles. But as hard as it is, and as uncomfortable it is, you're the one that has to carry it. See the difference? One is so heavy you cannot carry it alone. But there are times in our lives where, whether we like it or not, whether we feel it or not, we got to carry our own knapsack. We got to carry our own backpack. And you see the contrast, because let's face it, every day there's going to be daily burdens. For some of us, it's just getting out of bed. But you're the one who's going to get out of bed. Nobody else could do that for you. And yet there are others that are just so overwhelming. So what I thought is everybody has responsibilities that only you can carry. And yet we also have the responsibility of helping others carry the boulders, the heavy weight in their lives. Paul's saying some things in life are so heavy you can't bear it alone. You need help. And then there are other things in life, while they're not easy, they're your own backpack. Pick it up and carry it. You see the difference? Sometimes you ask for help because the burden is too heavy. Call 911. You know, if you've ever called a doctor these days, if you call a doctor office these days, you normally will get a recording that'll sound something like this. If this is an emergency, then hang up and call 911. Otherwise, stay on the line. If you need the pediatric doctor, dial 1. If you need the general physician, dial 2. If you need billing, dial 3. If this is regarding your appointment, dial 4. If you need the pharmacy, dial 5. But again, if this is an emergency, dial 911. And so here's the deal. If you got a cold or possibly a stomach bug, you hold on the line and you wait until you get to the appropriate dial number, and you would hit it and hit hashtag or whatever. But if you're having chest pains, you dial 911, or you immediately bypass that answering machine and you go to the emergency room. Is that not right? But here's the deal. Sometimes we dial 911 when we just need to pick up our sack. And some people need to dial 911, but they're acting like they don't have a problem. That's what we have around us here. Surrounded in this room is we have people who need to pick up their backpack, and we have people here who are acting like it's a backpack when it's a boulder, because you're too proud to let people know that you're being crushed by the weight. And so notice in this family here that very much like Galatia, I remember, you know, not all the time, even though it might hurt, even though it might be inconvenience, it's not always a 911 emergency. Sometimes it's just life. Pick up your daily burden. I had a guy, he's a mentor of mine, and I remember one time, I kind of waited along to the last second. I had something that was pretty major I had to get done, and I was struggling. You know, I did a thing called, and I know you guys probably don't understand this, but it's called procrastination, where, I waited till the very last second to get something done. And I remember I'm like, dude, man, you got to help me here. You got to help me. And I'll never forget what he says. He said, Kenny, your crisis is not my emergency. What? I mean, you're my friend. You're supposed to help me. He's like, I know, but you know what? Your crisis is now not going to be my emergency. You put it off. You wait till the last second. You procrastinate. It's your problem. You deal with it because your now crisis is not going to be my emergency. And he hung up on me. Well, you better believe that hurt. And you better believe I filed it away, because there was a time when he asked me to do something. I could not wait to use his words against him, say, you know what, I'd love to help you, but your crisis is not going to be my emergency. It didn't go over well. But he's right. Sometimes we have to carry our own load. But some things in life are too heavy for us not to ask for help. And Paul's illustrating the difference between burdens that are boulders and burdens that are backpacks. And there's a difference. It's just like moving. If someone has a sleeper sofa, it's going to take more than one person. But if it is a box full of pillowcases, you got this. Take it yourself. And that's what he's saying here. And that's why it seems like it's a contradiction. But what he's saying is sometimes we need to come around people and help them because it is a boulder they're trying to bear. And sometimes you need to just suck it up, Buttercup, and put on the backpack and carry it yourself. Because that's life. That's life. And so if you're still sitting there thinking, well, I'm still confused, I just kind of came up with a little test here to maybe help you recognize the difference between boulders and backpacks. And don't get up and walk out during this time, because it's going to make people think that I really hit a nerve here, all right? So hold it if you have to, but just stay with me, all right? Here's one. A young man is constantly oversleeping and tardy to school or late for work because he stays up playing video games all night long, and he blames mom and dad for not waking him up in the morning. Is that an example of you coming up under him and helping him carry that heavy burden? Or is that an example of carry your own backpack, big boy? If you know how to turn on the Xbox, then you can certainly set your alarm. See the difference? That's not a boulder. They lose their job. It's become their boulder because their crisis has now become their emergency as well. Somebody needs to sneak out and go to the bathroom, I think. Here's one. Someone spends all their money on lottery tickets, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, and Doritos, and they refuse to look for a job, but they're always asking you for money. Is that a burden that's a boulder, or is that a backpack? Now, that's a tough one, because we want to help people, don't we? We want to help. But sometimes you got to pick up your own backpack and stop acting like it's a boulder. Here's another one. Maybe it's a businessman or woman who works 12 hours days, 7 days a week, so they can afford that vacation home or that yacht or whatever. But so they can keep up with that, they ask you to run their kids everywhere. They ask you to get their kids to practice, you to get their kids to the game. Is that a boulder, or is that a backpack? You are right. It's a backpack. And that also is probably going to lead to another conversation where you need to restore them gently and say, you got your priorities wrong. You're chasing after things that are going to rust and be destroyed. You need to put your family first. You need to pick up your backpack. But then there's other cases. A married couple has 3 children. One day there's an accident, and one of the parents dies suddenly in a traffic accident. The widowed, overwhelmed, grieving parent all of a sudden is trying to do this on their own. That's a boulder. You don't say get over it. That's a boulder. Or a husband leaves his wife for another woman, leaving her alone to raise her kids. And now all of a sudden she's learning how to deal with the unanticipated expectation and pressure of trying to raise those kids on a single income or by herself. Is that a backpack or is that a boulder? It's a boulder. That's when we as a family have to come around them and help them shoulder that burden. And I say as a family, that's not just the preacher's job. That's just not a couple people in the leadership's job. That is the family, brothers and sisters in the family of God. If you see someone that's struggling and they are weighed down by the boulder and the pressure, then we need to come up under them and around them and help them shoulder that. There is a difference between backpacks and boulders. And Paul says we need to carry our own backpacks, but we also need to come around and help people. And again, as I said earlier, here's the problem with that. Is there are people here who are being crushed by a boulder, but they're trying to act like it's a backpack. And they aren't asking for help. And they don't want you to know how much they are being crushed. And then there are those who treat everything like it's an emergency. Everything's a 911. And they are sucking resources and time and people when they need to pick up their backpack. That's the truth. And here's the result of both of those cases. One who's trying to carry the boulder and doesn't want people to know is going to experience perpetual pain. Perpetual pain. The other is going to experience irresponsibility and enabling their whole entire life. And as a Christ follower, it is our responsibility to carry our own load, but to also come around others and help them when the burden is crushing. When someone is burdened by crushing cares and difficult events in life that are too much for one person to carry all by himself, crawl up under that burden and help that person carry it and so fulfill the law of Christ. I came across this video, and I'm going to finish with this. And this is such a great example of coming alongside of and crawling up under someone who has a burden. This happened almost a year ago. And ironically, these two men you're going to see are brothers. And almost a year ago, Johnny Brownlee of Britain and his brother Alistair Brownlee were in this triathlon. They were in the final leg of the triathlon. They were within a mile of finishing this thing. And I want you to watch this video and see what takes place.
Now, Johnny has to win and to be sure of taking the title. And right now he seems to have lost control of his legs, and this is worrying. Oh, and he's starting to slow, and there is a little way to go. There's half a K to go, and Johnny is running out of time and is losing. He's losing his sense of direction. This is worrying. Oh, goodness me. This is a horrible sight. Jonathan Brownlee has lost it now and has staggered to a stop at the side of the course, and Alistair's stopped to help him along, and Alistair is going to try and carry his brother home. Dramatic scenes in Cozumel as the Olympic champion carries his younger brother towards the podium.
Oh my God, I cannot believe what we are seeing here. Matt, is this allowed? Is he allowed to help his brother? You know, is that part of the rules? I'm not too sure. We've never seen anything like this before.
Unbelievable scenes. Unbelievable scenes in Cozumel. The Brownlee brothers arm in arm, but it's not by way of celebration. Henry Schoeman's celebrating. He's going to win this race in Cozumel out of nowhere. But we have to be concerned about the health of Jonathan Brownlee, and they're not even on the final stretch yet. Schoeman wins in Cozumel. The brothers are coming home arm in arm to finish in second and third, but Johnny can hardly stand, and Alistair is having to drag him across the line and pushing him home for second. Johnny finishes in second. Goodness me, what an incredible conclusion here in Cozumel. I've never seen anything like that anywhere in world sport.
Now, he did survive, by the way. Didn't look like it. He and his brother actually were in an interview later on. But I found really amazing is there is no way Johnny would come within a half mile of finishing first in a triathlon had he not been picking up his backpack daily. Every day he picked up a backpack Every day, whether it was comfortable or not, he got up early or late or whenever, and he trained, he ate right, he did everything he could to get to the point where he was within a half a mile of winning this triathlon. He carried his backpack. The other thing I thought of immediately when I saw this clip is I couldn't help but notice the man who actually won. And the bragging and just that, I was like, man, if anyone considers himself to be something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. That's what I wanted to say to him, strutting around like he won, when the reality is it was given to him. And so I was sitting there thinking about it, but the whole point was, most of all, I couldn't help to notice the beauty of a brother coming along up and under and relieving him of this unbearable weight where he couldn't even carry himself anymore. He was all over the place. His legs were giving up. And he came along under him and he grabbed him and they were running side by side. And what I love about this brother who did that is then when he got to the finish line, he had the, whatever you want to call it, the humility to say, you know what, my brother had me beat. So he steps back and kind of pushes him aside. So he took third and his brother took second. And I thought, man, that is exactly what it should look like in the church. Is we all have to do our daily training. We need to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. We need to constantly be on our own. We need to be thinking about the things that are going on in life. And we got to pick up the backpack daily to run the race. Daily. But there are times when things come at us in life, unexpected, out of left field. Maybe it's a medical diagnosis, maybe it's a relationship, whatever. And when that happens, when the pressure is so great that you cannot stand anymore, you are staggering, then we, brothers and sisters, need to come up alongside and around them and help push that person over the finish line. That's carrying one another's burdens. And I also couldn't help but think of this final thing. That's exactly what Jesus Christ did for you. Because we are so buried with this boulder, this heavy weight that is crushing us. It's called sin. And it has entrapped us. It has made us a slave. It is killing us. And we have been crushed. There is nothing we could ever do to get out from underneath that heavy burden. We are in so much trouble. You cannot escape the weight of sin. But Jesus took that burden. He came up alongside and said, I got this. I got this. And he took the weight of all of my sins and all of your sins. And he took it to Calvary. And he did it for you and me. And the only way you will escape that, listen to me, you can't do anything to get saved. You can't do it yourself. It's only through him. But there is one thing you have to do. You have to lay your backpack at the foot of the cross. And there are some of you here that the only reason you've not allowed that boulder to get off of you is because you're too stinking proud. You cannot understand that you can get out from this, or that he would even do this, or why would he do it for me? I get it for you to do it for him, but not for me. I've screwed up. My boulder is too heavy. If that is you, and if I'm speaking to you right now, then you need to drop the backpack at the foot of the cross and let him relieve you of that boulder of weight of sin that is burying you. And accept that forgiveness, accept that grace, accept that mercy, and cross that finish line. Because there's going to be a day we're going to cross that line and he's going to say, well done, my good and faithful servant. Well done. And so as we close today in prayer, I know I threw a lot out there, but I want you to think about, first of all, your own personal responsibility. There are some of you that need to start picking up your backpack in your own life. And even here around the church and helping us, because we are trying to help people all the time. But you need to pick up the backpack. And then there are other times when we have to come around. There are a lot of people that are being buried with burdens, and we as a corporate body need to be there for them. Physically, financially, emotionally, spiritually. And it can't be done by just one or two or a dozen people. It takes all of us. And that's what we have to do to carry one another's burdens. But more important than that, if you've come here today, Jesus Christ did what he did to take that boulder, that debt of sin off of you. what he did. And you have an opportunity to surrender to that and accept that. Let that be your way to cross the finish line. So I'm going to pray. We're going to stand. We're going to sing, Come to the Altar. And I'm going to invite you. Come down front. We'll have people here that would love to pray with you, would talk to you about Jesus. We've got a baptistry. I don't know if it's filled or not, but it doesn't take long. We'll do that too. Let me pray. God, I thank you so much that while we sin, that you demonstrate your love for us, and that, God, that you loved us so much that while we are helpless and the punishment for our sins is death, you gave us an escape from that. You sent your son to lift the heavy boulder, the heavy weight, a weight that we could not get off on our own. We could not remove it ourselves. And so we thank you for that. God, I pray that you would reach out to each and every one of us and say to us what it is that needs to be said, and that we would respond to it in the way that needs to be responded to. And I pray this in the name of Jesus.